So one thing that we don't have a lot of material for the second age, but something that is interesting is the geography. Um, Tolkien put a lot of thought into it, apparently, and Numenor, its significance obviously comes in the same way that ancient Rome had its significance, in the sense of like it was an idea. If you remember, Rome was an idea, even though obviously it didn't live up to that idea, but it was this idea of the heights of republic that ended up becoming an empire. And when you whispered Rome, it whispered civilization, it whispered the civilized world, the promise of a future, I guess. Things that obviously it didn't live up to, but Numenor has that same kind of mystique, but more so because even Rome hailed towards Atlantis, and Numenor is very much a reflection of Atlantis within the story. Its significance comes really more in the fact that its descendants are form Arnor and Gondor, which are the important countries, important nations of the Third Age in the Lord of the Rings. Um, and in the relations of men with elves, the Numenorians came first, as they were the symbolic representation of what was left of the men of the First Age, who had, fortunately or unfortunately, combined themselves with the elves themselves, which is how we got Elrond and Elros. And Elros is obviously the first king of Numenor, the predecessor, the one who founded it. So the importance in Numenor, its existence, apart from the fact that it not so much allegorically, but it represents the fall of Atlantis and the psychological trauma that has left in the psyche of humanity since. It's one of those things that we remember only its downfall, because it's connected to the deluge, which is connected to the Bible and the concept of the deluge in the Bible and all of that. And it has left an imprint in the psyche of humanity, but yet we don't remember much of it outside of that trauma, right? Because that's kind of how it works. And even Tolkien touches upon that with Numenor, and the fact that very little of Numenor is remembered outside of Ar-Pharazôn and the treachery that led to its downfall afterwards. But it's significant because it is the height of the man-elvish hybrid creation of the Second Age. They reach the epitome. They go from being an insular kingdom on an island way out there, as far west as could be possible, to becoming a kingdom that a maritime empire, let's say, that pretty much conquers all of Middle Earth that touches upon the sea. Not so much inland, but anything that has access to the sea. They, by the end of their time, they pretty much had forts there, had influence there, for good or worse. And it does seem to get worse as time progresses, especially once they take Sauron captive and allow him to become advisor to Pharazôn, or Pharazôn allows him to become his advisor. So this is really just a description of the island, which I was never really particularly impressed with, but I was impressed. I am always impressed with his details. The way that Tolkien writes about trees and about geography in his world, it's like it's as if he had dreamed it, like as if he had seen it in a dream, or if he had lived through it in a past life. It's very vivid for any kind of a writer. I've always felt it, been fascinated by the fact that he's able to transport me into the location by all of these details, many of which are unfortunately lost on me because I have not been born and living around a lot of flora and fauna in my life, being mostly in big cities. So it has a nostalgic nature, but it also is a little difficult for me because I don't have as much detailed information in my own repertoire about you know, trees and all of these type of things. Nonetheless, it does evoke it. He doesn't fail in evoking it, and that's the first thing that I wanted to say. Because when you read this stuff, it's like he was there, you know. So in any case, the land of Numenor resembled in outline a five-pointed star or pentangle with a central portion some 250 miles across north and south and east and west, from which extended five large peninsular promontories. I've always been, I mean, the number 5 in the pentangle is a particular number esoterically, and usually one that's ominous, which makes sense in the case of Numenor. Possibly done on purpose, possibly done because of the magical aspect of it. Unfortunately, I don't know if he ever mentioned why he chose a pentangle in any of his letters, and obviously it's too late to ask him, but it is obviously a very purposeful decision. These promontories were regarded as separate regions, and I'm probably going to butcher a lot of the language here, so bear with me. And they were named Forostar, Northlands, Andustar, Westlands, Hjarnustar, Southwestlands, Hjarrostar, Southeastlands, and Orostar, Eastlands. The central portion was called Mitalmar, the inlands, and it had no coast except the land about Romena and the head of its firth. A small part of the Mitalmar was, however, separated from the rest and called Arandor, the king's land. In Arandor were the haven of Romena, the Meneltarma, and Armenelos, the city of the kings, and it was at all times the most populous region of Numenor. So pretty well defined already from the get-go. The Mitalmar, the central region, right, was raised above the promontories, not reckoning the height of their mountains and hills. It was a region of grasslands and lowdowns, and few trees grew there. Near to the center of the Mitalmar stood the tall mountain called Meneltarma, pillar of the heavens, sacred to the worship of Eru Iluvatar. This is the first time also that I see mention of worship, and particularly of Eru, because it's always been a reference to the Valar in some sense or form, particularly with the elves. The Valar have always felt like they were prominent, not only in the events of the First Age or even prior to that, but in the I guess spiritual understanding of the peoples of Middle-earth. Iluvatar has always been in there, but he's never been brought to the foreground like he seems to be done in this case. And it is weird and interesting that this same mountain, which I don't remember now if it's supposed to be a volcano or not, so far it doesn't seem to be, is goes from being a place of worship of the One, right, to the worship of Morgoth in the end. So that's kind of weird, creepy, but also interesting in the development of the history of Numenor, which we can probably get into if we ever get more into the Arfar zone and what happens towards the end, because at the end it becomes a satanic cult, very much like what he's hinting at in the New Shadow, that worships the faithful, those people of Numenor who wanted to stick basically to worship of Eru and their connection to the elves. These people were sacrificed in this mountain to Morgoth, which really kind of evokes the biblical Moloch in that sense. Though the lower slopes of the mountain were gentle and grass covered, it grew ever steeper, and towards the summit it could not be scaled, but a winding spiral road was made upon it, beginning at its foot upon the south and ending below the lip of the summit upon the north. For the summit was somewhat flattened and depressed, and could contain a great multitude, but it remained untouched by hands throughout the history of Numenor. No building, no raised altar, not even a pile of undressed stones ever stood there, and no other likeness of a temple did the Numenorians possess in all the days of their grace until the coming of Sauron. So that's an interesting note, and also kind of odd why they wouldn't have any kind of altar. at all, even before Sauron comes and turns it satanic. Why wouldn't they have one to Iluvatar? Maybe to retain a sense of that purity, a sense of, is that, I mean, because even the Celts, I mean, had temples and such, or at least we think they did. Maybe they didn't. Maybe it was more pure like this. It's interesting. There no tool or weapon had ever been born, and there none might speak any word, save the king only. Thrice only in each year the king spoke, offering prayer for the coming year at the Eru Kierme in the first days of spring, praise of Eru Iluvatar at the Eru Laitale in midsummer, and thanksgiving to him at the Eru Hantale at the end of autumn. At these times the king ascended the mountain on foot, followed by a great concourse of the people, clad in white and garlanded but silent. Interesting, because I've had imagery similar in some of the stuff that I've wanted to write. So maybe it is referring to that sense of purity and innocence and simplicity that spirituality can carry when not forced into a religious setting. At other times, the people were free to climb to the summit alone or in company. But it is said that the silence was so great that even a stranger ignorant of Numenor and all its history, if he were transported thither, would not have dared to speak aloud. No bird ever came there save only eagles. If anyone approached the summit, at once 3 eagles would appear and alight upon 3 rocks near to the western edge. But at the times of the 3 prayers they did not descend, remaining in the sky and hovering above the people. They were called the witnesses of Manwe, and they were believed to be sent by him from Aman to keep watch upon the holy mountain and upon all the land. So there's a sense of silence, that silence is the ultimate spirituality in a sense. And then these 3 eagles that obviously represent, first of all, and we have the symbolism of 3, and they're connected to Manwe, and this mountain is called the Holy Mountain. So very interesting. The base of the Meneltarma sloped gently into the surrounding plain, but it extended after the fashion of roots, 5 long low ridges outwards in the direction of the 5 promontories of the land, and these were called Tarmasundar, the roots of the pillar. Along the crest of the southwestern ridge, the climbing road approached the mountain, and between this ridge and that on the southeast, the land went down into a shallow valley that was named Noirinan, the Valley of the Tombs, for at its head chambers were cut in the rock at the base of the mountain, in which were the tombs of the kings and queens of Numenor, which really evokes ancient tombs, not just pharaohs, because the pharaohs obviously we believe that the pyramids represented that, but they might not have been. That might have been something later on in life. But definitely that ancient practice is evoked, even like maybe the Etruscan tombs in this respect, which I feel is more accurate. But here we have already quite, in only 3 pages, and there's only a few more to go, we have quite the description of this land, as you can tell, very detailed, very precise, and stuff that basically Rings of Power could have used, but did not.